Hey, everybody, have you heard about this whole, hashtag no spend 2025 thing? It's blowing up on TikTok.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Right, like everyone's suddenly like, okay, I'm ditching DoorDash. I'm done with all this consumerism.
Yeah.
I'm going full minimalist for a whole year. I've got to admit, the whole thing has me pretty intrigued.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fascinating to see how much it's resonating with people. And, it makes you wonder if it's tapping into something a little bit deeper
Right.
than just like a fleeting social media trend.
Totally.
I think you're right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it feels like there's something more there, right? Like a growing discomfort with how much we're all pushed to just consume, consume, consume.
Absolutely. And especially, coming at it from like a faith perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. The source we're looking at today really digs into that idea.
Yeah.
Like it points out that the average American is hit with something like over 4,000 ads every single day.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So no wonder we're all feeling the pressure to buy all the time.
Mm. And then you add in online shopping and, these services like DoorDash that make spending so easy.
Yeah.
You barely even think about it.
Right.
It's kind of like a recipe for trouble, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's not even just about our bank accounts,
Right.
The deeper issue is this message that we're constantly bombarded with,
Okay.
that our worth is somehow tied to what we own.
Oh, that's so true.
It's like this never-ending comparison game,
Yeah.
especially on social media.
Oof. Don't even get me started on social media.
Right, where you've got all these influencers showcasing these picture-perfect lives that revolve around just buying more stuff.
It's also curated, right?
It is.
Like, who lives like that?
Nobody I know.
Right. It just sets everyone up to feel anxious and inadequate.
Exactly.
Because you're constantly comparing yourself to this unattainable standard.
Totally. And what I found really interesting was how the source brings in this theological perspective.
Okay.
Specifically, a Pan-Africanist, Yahweh-focused view.
Yeah, that was new for me. I was like, wait, what?
It's not something you hear about every day.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So can you maybe break that down a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So a Pan-Africanist, Yahweh-focused view basically centers on the liberation and spiritual upliftment of people of African descent,
Okay.
with a strong emphasis on social justice.
Got it.
And connecting back to their ancestral spiritual roots through the worship of Yahweh.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So how does that connect to this whole no spend idea?
Well, Yahweh's teachings, as understood through this lens, really emphasize humility, contentment, and resisting the temptation to covet what other people have.
That makes sense.
Remember the 10th commandment?
Oh, yeah.
You shall not covet.
It's like the original anti-consumerism message.
It is. It speaks directly to the dangers of that comparison game that's so prevalent on social media.
Oh, totally.
Oh.
And it's not just about being financially responsible.
Right.
It's about examining our hearts and, making sure our desires are aligned with our faith.
Exactly. And speaking of aligning our desires, the source goes on to unpack some key scriptures that warn about the dangers of materialism.
Yeah, those were pretty intense.
Right.
Like 1 Timothy 6:10, Darrow. It says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." It's not the money itself that's bad.
No.
It's the love of it.
And it's that attachment, that obsessive desire for more and more and more.
And that can lead us down a really dangerous path.
For sure. It can totally distort our priorities.
Yeah, and there's that verse from Proverbs that really stuck with me, too.
Yeah, which one?
Proverbs 23:4-5. It talks about how fleeting wealth can be. It says, "Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle."
Wow, that's powerful imagery.
Right.
It really puts things in perspective.
It does, especially in a culture that's so obsessed with accumulating more and more stuff.
Totally. It reminds us that true security and fulfillment can't be found in material possessions.
For sure. They can disappear in the blink of an eye.
Exactly. So where do we find that lasting contentment then?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And the source points us to a different kind of treasure.
You mean like the treasures we store up in heaven?
Exactly. Matthew 6:19-21 reminds us, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also."
It's about shifting our focus from the temporary to the eternal right.
Absolutely. Investing in things that have lasting value.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
what if this whole hashtag no spend 2025 thing is less about financial discipline and more about a spiritual realignment?
I think that's a really powerful way to look at it.
Right. Like, less about deprivation and more about intentionality.
It's about making choices that reflect our deepest values and our relationship with Yahweh.
This is already making me think differently about my own spending habits and what I prioritize in life.
That's great to hear. You know, it's all about that self-reflection and making those conscious choices.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to hear more about how we can cultivate that sense of contentment and intentionality in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely dive into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Perfect. I can't wait.
Me neither. You know, it's interesting how this whole conversation ties back to that idea of contentment that we touched on earlier.
Right.
The source highlights Philippians 4.1112,
Okay.
where Paul writes, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances are. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want.
Wow.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is really powerful, especially in a culture that's constantly telling us we need more to be happy.
Right.
Like it's this endless treadmill of striving and acquiring.
And never really arriving.
Yeah, and it never feels like enough.
Never.
But the source seems to be suggesting a different path.
It is a path that requires us to really challenge those deeply ingrained messages.
Okay.
And to cultivate a spirit of gratitude.
Gratitude for what we already have.
Yes, exactly. It's about recognizing the abundance in our lives, even amidst, you know, challenges or limitations.
That makes me think about how often I get caught up comparing myself to others on social media.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
It is a slippery slope.
Totally. Like feeling like I'm not enough because I don't have the latest gadget or I haven't been on the most extravagant vacation.
You're definitely not alone in that.
It's so frustrating.
It's a common struggle.
Yeah.
But you know, the source reminds us that our value isn't determined by those things. It's not about our possessions or our experiences.
It's about something deeper.
It's about our inherent worth as children of Yahweh.
It's so easy to lose sight of that, though, right?
It is, in the midst of all the noise and distractions.
Yeah. Like it all just gets so loud and overwhelming.
Absolutely. And that's why I think practices like this whole hashtag no spend 2025 thing can be so valuable.
In what way?
They offer us an opportunity to step back from that consumerist frenzy.
To hit the pause button.
Exactly. And to reconnect with what truly matters.
So it's not just about saying no to spending money.
It's about saying yes to something deeper.
Saying yes to a more intentional way of life.
Yes. One that's rooted in gratitude, generosity, and a deeper connection with our faith. It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Okay.
And choosing to invest in things that have eternal significance.
You know, that makes me think about the idea of stewardship. That's often talked about in faith circles.
Right.
It's not just about managing our finances wisely, but being responsible with all the resources Yahweh has entrusted to us.
Exactly.
Our time, our talents, our energy.
It's about using those resources to make a positive impact in the world, to serve others, and to build a more just and equitable society.
I really like how this is all connecting between our personal choices and our collective responsibility to create a better world.
It's all interconnected. Our individual actions, no matter how small they may seem, contribute to the larger tapestry of life.
And when we choose to live in alignment with our faith, when we prioritize generosity and compassion,
we become part of a ripple effect that can transform communities and ultimately the world.
That's beautiful. It makes this whole hashtag no spend 2025 movement feel so much bigger than just a personal finance challenge.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like a social movement.
I like that.
A collective pushback against the excesses of consumerism.
Yeah.
And a reorientation towards a more meaningful way of life.
Exactly. And movements like this are often born out of a deep yearning for something more. A sense that the current system isn't working for everyone.
It's like people are waking up to the fact that the constant pursuit of more doesn't necessarily lead to happiness or fulfillment.
No, it doesn't. And there's a growing awareness that we need to find a more sustainable and just way to live on this planet.
Okay.
And that requires a shift in values, a reordering of priorities.
And maybe, just maybe, this trend, even if it's just a temporary experiment for some people, can be a catalyst for that kind of awakening.
I think it could be.
A chance to step back, reassess our priorities, and realign our lives with what truly matters.
Absolutely. It's definitely a step in the right direction, It's encouraging to see so many people, especially young people,
Yeah,
questioning the status quo and seeking alternative ways of being in the world.
I love that.
It gives me hope that we can create a future where our collective well-being is prioritized over profit.
Yes.
And where our relationship with Yahweh informs all aspects of our lives.
Including our spending habits.
Including our spending habits.
I love that sense of hope. It feels empowering to know that we have the power to make different choices, to shape a different future.
We do.
Both individually and collectively.
Absolutely. And it all starts with that inward examination.
Okay.
That willingness to challenge the messages we've been fed and reconnect with our deepest values.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's not about the specific challenge itself.
No.
It's about the deeper reflection it prompts.
Yes. It's about using this moment as an opportunity to examine our lives, our choices, and our impact on the world around us.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And as we move into the last part of our deep dive, I'm really eager to hear more about your personal experience with this.
Okay.
Because I think it's so valuable to hear how others are navigating these complex issues in their own lives.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share a little bit about my journey.
Yeah, I'm really eager to hear about your experience. I think it's so valuable to hear how others are navigating these complex issues in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to share a little bit about my own journey.
Okay.
My journey kind of started a few years ago when I was going through a particularly challenging time. I had lost my job and was facing financial difficulties and felt a lot of pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle that I could no longer afford.
Yeah.
And I found myself, turning to shopping as a way to kind of cope
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
with the stress and anxiety.
It's so easy to fall into those patterns.
It is. It's like using spending as a way to numb out uncomfortable feelings.
Right.
But for me, it became clear that this wasn't a sustainable solution.
Okay.
It was actually making things worse.
How so?
The more I bought, the more empty I felt.
Oh, wow.
It was like I was trying to fill a void with material possessions,
Yeah,
but nothing seemed to work.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So how did you break free from that cycle?
It was a process, but a pivotal moment for me was when I rediscovered the power of gratitude.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started focusing on the things I was thankful for.
Okay.
My health, my family, my community.
Yeah.
Even the small everyday joys that I had been taking for granted.
That's a great practice.
Yeah, it was a conscious choice to shift my attention away from what I lacked and towards what I already had.
Right. It's like moving from a scarcity mindset
Exactly.
to one of abundance.
Yeah, and as I cultivated that sense of gratitude,
Okay.
I found that my desire for material things began to diminish.
That's amazing.
It was really interesting to observe that shift within myself.
Yeah.
And I realized that true happiness and fulfillment,
Right.
they weren't tied to what I owned.
It's about something deeper.
It's about the quality of my relationships, my connection with Yahweh, my contribution to the world.
It sounds like you underwent a real transformation,
I did. It was profound.
not just in your spending habits, but in your whole outlook on life.
Yeah, and it wasn't about deprivation.
Okay. Or denying myself things I enjoyed.
Right.
It was about aligning my actions with my values and finding joy in simpler things.
Like what?
Spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing creative endeavors.
Those are great.
Yeah. It was about living more authentically and intentionally.
I love that. It sounds like this whole hashtag no spend 2025 thing, even if approached from a purely secular perspective, could be a gateway to that kind of transformation for people.
I think it could be.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to step off that consumerist treadmill
Yeah.
and reevaluate what truly matters.
We hit the reset button.
Exactly. It's a chance to break free from the pressure to constantly buy, and to reconnect with our deeper values and aspirations.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you hope listeners will walk away with?
I hope they'll consider this true contentment and lasting joy. They aren't found in accumulating more stuff.
Right.
They're found in cultivating gratitude for what we already have.
Investing in meaningful relationships and living in alignment with our faith.
That's a powerful message.
Whether or not you decide to participate in hashtag no spend 2025,
Right.
I encourage you to reflect on your own spending habits.
To take a step back.
And ask yourself, what message am I sending with my choices?
Okay.
Are they reflecting my truest values?
That's a great question to ponder. It's a reminder that our spending is not just about money.
No.
It's a reflection of our priorities, our values,
Absolutely.
and ultimately our worldview.
It is. And when we make conscious choices about how we spend our resources, we have the power to create a more just sustainable and spiritually fulfilling life.
For ourselves and for generations to come.
For ourselves and for generations to come.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
It's given me so much to think about, not just in terms of my spending, but in terms of how I want to live my life. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the journey towards a more intentional and fulfilling life is ongoing. It's not about perfection,
Right.
but about progress. May Yahweh bless you on your journey.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to embark on your own journey of reflection and growth. Thanks for joining us.